Folks, as we have talked about in previous videos, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have themselves a pretty good amount of tough decisions to make regarding their salary cap situation. Now, we've talked about potential cuts, including guys like Donovan Smith, Russell Gage, and some of the other names that have been out there, but one of the more popular names that maybe a lot of Bucs fans are torn on is the possibility of the Buccaneers moving on from pseudo-starting running back Leonard Fournette. And I am not alone in this video. Joining me yet again is the voice of my colleague at BucsNation.com, the co-host of the Cannon Fire podcast, and the main host of the Real to Real podcast, Mr. Evan Wanish. Evan, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on yet again.
Of course, we're really getting my money's worth here with having you here on the channel, man. We're getting a lot of content. And look, let's talk about this, okay? It's no secret that Leonard Fournette is making a lot of money, Evan. He just signed a 3-year deal last year. His cap hit is scheduled to be a little under $8.5 million with a dead cap hit of $5 million. So the Buccaneers would only be saving around $3.5 million with this move. But as we've said before, Evan, whenever you're negative $55 million over the cap, you have to really pinch a lot of pennies in these types of situations. Is that a safe thing to say, Evan?
Yeah. You're looking for any way possible to be able to save that money, and unfortunately, in some cases, it could be making some tough decisions on some pretty good players.
Yeah, and look, Leonard Fournette, I know a lot of people love Leonard Fournette, right? He's playoff Lenny, he's Lombardi Lenny, he's a lot of things to this Buccaneers fan base. He just wrapped up his 3rd year in Tampa Bay. All in all, I think that a lot of people would consider his time in Tampa an overall success, Evan. I think that that is a pretty realistic thing to say, but taking a look at last year, where Leonard Fournette was in terms of 2022 statistics and 2021 statistics, it's a pretty big difference. And I want to talk about it like this, okay? Leonard Fournette had 180 rushes in 2021 and 189 rushes in 2022. The difference here is that he had 812 rushing yards in 2021 and only 668 rushing yards in 2022, Evan. 8 touchdowns in 2021, 3 touchdowns in 2022. Not great, all things considered, right?
Yeah. He didn't. I mean, there was times he was outplayed, by Rashad White. Well, he starts off showing up to OTAs or camp, reportedly a little bit out of shape, which is never a great sign. But yeah, I mean, he actually had a great start to the year in Dallas. It really ran all over the Cowboys. And then, sort of never really got back on track. Was dealing with a couple injuries here and there. And then obviously, Rashad White playing better. And honestly, the offensive line in front of Leonard Fournette wasn't as good this year. I mean, I think you have to acknowledge that as well. And they just, no matter who it was, Fournette or White, they couldn't run the ball to save their lives. So, one of the worst rushing attacks in NFL history, easily the worst in the NFL. So, Fournette had definitely had something to do with that. Now, I mean, he was still somewhat productive in the passing game, but like Rashad White towards the end really took away those snaps from him on 3rd down. So, if you're looking at it from a perspective of a cap saving thing, yeah, like Fournette may be expendable at this point because of Rashad White's emergence, which, we talked about Donovan Smith a little bit earlier and said that the tough thing about Donovan Smith is there's nobody else on the roster to maybe come in and replace him. Well, in Fournette's case, unfortunately for Fournette, there is somebody on this roster who could potentially pretty much take his snaps, and the Bucs can save a little bit of money. So that's what the decision that they're going to have to weigh.
Yeah, and that was interesting too. You just said too that Fournette looked good as a pass catching back. And I've heard some people dispute this, but I kind of disagree, in terms of people saying, oh, he didn't look that good as a receiving back. I thought he did a pretty serviceable job. Look at it like this. Leonard Fournette had 83 targets this year. He had 84 in 2021, Evan. He had 73 receptions in 2022 compared to 69 receptions in 2021. 523 receiving yards in 2022 to his 454 in 2021. 3 receiving touchdowns in 2022 to his 2 in 2021. Statistically, this is the best year Leonard Fournette has ever had as a receiving back. He has won this as actually his career high for receiving yards, more than in 2019 where he had 100 targets for 522 receiving yards, Evan. So it's a really weird situation, right? Where Fournette did not necessarily look great as a runner. He was down an entire 1 yard per average from 2021 to 2022. In my opinion, I feel like he did make up for it by having his best year ever statistically as a receiving back. What are your thoughts on all of that situations?
Yeah, I mean, it helps when you're able to contribute in more than one way. The run game can't get going. You're able to contribute in the passing game. Like, I mean, it's certainly good. And like before Fournette came to Tampa Bay, like, yeah, he had those 100 targets or whatever in Jacksonville, but like that year, he was basically Jacksonville's offense. And like he even like throughout college and throughout early in his career, he was never really considered this guy that could be reliable to catch the ball out of the backfield. And if you remember in 2020, he really was not reliable for the Buccaneers catching the ball out of the backfield. Him and Ronald Jones were both really struggling to catch the ball and be a consistent third down back for the team. And that really changed in 2021, and then obviously continued over into 2022. The team and the offense overall didn't have as much success in 2022, but Fournette himself, in terms of receiving yards and catches and everything, was still pretty productive there. So that was good to see, and that would be sort of a pro of keeping him, is that you could have a guy who can play all 3 downs, and that certainly holds value as well.
One thing you said too, though, that's important to note is that Rashad White is there, right? And while he didn't outsnap, Leonard Fournette as much as people may have thought, I believe most games when he wasn't injured, Fournette was still out snapping Rashad White in most situations. As you said, in critical moments, in third downs, heck, Rashad White had a game winner against the New Orleans Saints. There were situations where the Buccaneers said, we are going to go with Rashad White in this situation over Leonard Fournette. And there was reports that Fournette wasn't happy about that. Todd Bowles was asked about that. He said he felt really good about the way the running back split was going. And the point being is this. To your point, Evan, yes, the Buccaneers do have Rashad White there. He is there. And I do wonder what the coaching staff now thinks of Fournette after this year. Do you think that they may have some type of willingness to move on? Or do you feel that since Todd Bowles has come out and said that he wants to run the football more, that may have an incentive for them to keep Fournette throughout this upcoming season as well?
Yeah, I do think this is one where I don't have a source on this or anything, but I do think it's likely that the Buccaneers do move on from Fournette. I think especially because now Tom Brady isn't there. If Tom Brady was there, I think maybe he would have advocated for Fournette to return. Now that Brady's not there, I think it makes even more sense to just move on, get that cap space. And like I said, you have Rashad White there. Now, I wouldn't necessarily give the starting job to Rashad White because I think Rashad a change of pace and then a third down back. But you can find a running back in the fifth round or so, or in the third round, even if you wanted to really invest a pick, or even like a free agent who's a bit cheaper than Fournette's number, that can fill that type of role and be somewhat productive for you for a bit cheaper. So I do think that the Buccaneers are going to move on from Fournette. It wouldn't shock me if he stayed, but if I had to guess, I would guess that Fournette's days as a Buccaneer are likely over.
When you look at that idea of replacing Fournette, we talked about it with Donovan Smith. We're going to talk about it with Fournette now. Do you look to free agency to maybe acquire a veteran that is cheaper than Fournette? Do you look to the draft? Do you look to a combination of both? Do you look to the guys that you currently have on the roster? Evan, Rashad White, I believe Keyshawn Vaughn is still under contract. They have Patrick Laird now. I believe Giovanni Bernard is a free agent. So what would kind of be your guess as to what paths the Buccaneers may take to bolster that running back room that they have now and could potentially change with the release of Fournette?
Yeah, so basically, the only two running backs that they have under contract on the roster that played in games last year are Rashad White and Keyshawn Vaughn. Now, obviously, yeah, they had Patrick Laird, some guys on the practice squad and stuff, but those guys, they shouldn't be really considered, I think, to take a starting job or anything. But I do think you could look to either free agency or the draft. It's tough that the Bucs don't have a fourth round pick because that feels like kind of the sweet spot of maybe where you could pick a guy. But maybe, I mean, hey, if they like a guy enough in the third round, they pick Rashad White in the third round. I mean, that shouldn't stop them from getting a guy. I think there's a lot more needs on this team, so I'm not sure if running back in the third round is likely. But I could see them picking a back at some point. And like I said, in free agency, you can find some value, some guys that may not be as good as Fournette, but maybe a bit cheaper than Fournette. And it's about balancing the production. Is the drop off so great for the $1.5 million less? Like, is Fournette that much of a better player, or is Fournette a better player, but is it closer? And I think if it's closer, I think you go with the cheaper option then, pair whoever that may be with Rashad White, and I think that's what the Bucs may elect to do. I don't think that Rashad White is going to be given the starting bell cow running back role. So I would expect them, especially if Fournette's released, I would expect them to add a running back at some point this offseason.
I got to agree with you there, Evan. Look, if I had to guess right now on two questions, you already gave your thoughts and opinions on it. Will they move on from Fournette? You said yes. I'm going to tend to agree with you. I think the idea of Brady not being there plays a humongous factor in this. I also, again, I said this with Donovan Smith. Todd Bowles was not shy about talking about certain things this past season throughout the year as guys struggled. Heard about it with Donovan Smith, and you heard about it a little bit with Leonard Fournette. Whenever reporters would say, hey, Todd Bowles, what do you think about Leonard Fournette and the running back splits and whatnot? Bowles didn't back down. He said, I feel good about where we are at with this running back split. And the only thing that I could say that may keep Fournette around, which is why whenever I say will they, I'm going to say yes, but should they? Whenever you look at Bowles' idea for what he wants to do in this offense, especially with the question marks that they're going to have at quarterback, running the football more, do you want to have a versatile guy like Fournette who can not just give you some power, but also give you some receiving ability to complement a guy like Rashad White? That's a pretty legitimate, question to ask given what Todd Bowles' current philosophy is right now for how he wants his offense to run. I also think that whoever is the next offensive coordinator is going to play a big factor into that as well.
Yeah.
How are they going to view Leonard Fournette? Left tackle's one thing, right? I feel like there are a lot of offensive linemen that can fit into an offensive system, but running back is another thing too. Like OCs like to have some good skill position players. So if you bring in a guy who just loves what Leonard Fournette does, then there may be a more likely chance that he is going to be sticking around and how it may make more sense of it. Is that, again, something that is accurate to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that honestly, that may be a question that they're asking. I mean, they've had 9 offensive coordinator interviews, 10 if you're counting the second one for Dan Pitcher. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're the Bucs, like you may ask about that. You may ask about, you're not just asking about the quarterback situation because it's an entire offense thing. What is your view of the overall offense? And I'm sure Leonard Fournette's name has come up in those conversations. And what do you like? What don't you like? If the Bucs say like, hey, our situation, we could cut Fournette. Is the offensive coordinator a candidate going to be like, oh well, I really like him, or okay, yeah, that works for me because I'm looking for this in a player. So I do think the offensive coordinator could make a pretty big deal, pretty big difference when it comes to Fournette's future here.
And I think ultimately, too, like you said, and me and you both talked about this at length. Running backs are a position that you can get good guys in a large variety of ways. It's not going to cost a ton of
Yes.
free agency to get a decent running back in a platoon. We are in a league now where running backs, it's a committee in most cases. I mean, look at the San Francisco 49ers. They still run a committee in most situations, even with Christian
Yeah.
McCaffrey. Getting a guy in the draft, I think, is entirely in the possibility. You also got to remember the Buccaneers have drafted a running back in most drafts in recent years, Evan. I mean, geez, last year they took Rashad White. 2 years ago, did they take Raymond Calais? I cannot remember if they took him, but I do remember
I believe they took Keyshawn Vaughn and Raymond Calais. I think.
Right. So the Buccaneers are not shy to draft running backs, and that trend may very well continue as they continue to bolster their ranks, grab some platoon type guys, and potentially look on to replace a guy like Leonard Fournette if they want to, all depending on what
Yeah.
goes on with all the variables that go into a move like that. But folks,
Running back's the one thing, real quick.
yeah, sure.
Running back's the one position where, like, sure, it's nice to have an elite option, like, Saquon Barkley or a Christian McCaffrey, or it's like those guys are, yeah, those guys are really game changers. But when you look at the most successful teams, you know, the running back position in today's NFL is just not valued the same. The running back money is not valued the same. It is just it's not the same. It's really not. If you look at the teams, I mean, right now, the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs are playing the Super Bowl, and
They have
both
platoons.
of their yeah, I mean, both of them. They're not paying a lot of money to their running backs. I think if you look, I don't know where exactly the graphic is, but the past, like, I think it's like 12, 10 or 12 Super Bowl winners, if you look at what they're paying their starting running back, the highest thing is just a little over $1 million for, like, their starting running back. So these teams are not paying a ton for running backs. And while you may not find an elite option that way, I mean, hey, you could draft an elite option and have him under rookie contract for multiple years. You may not have an elite option at running back, but you have an option that you can still win with. So I think it hurts Fournette when it comes to that. The running backs are seemingly becoming easier and easier to find. So for Fournette's future in Tampa Bay, it certainly hurts it. And I just think he's done in Tampa because, just like we talked about, you weigh the not necessarily the pros and cons, but like the reasons they could keep him, the reasons they wouldn't keep him, and the reasons they wouldn't certainly outweigh the reasons they would. So we mentioned a bunch of reasons they wouldn't, but couldn't really come up with a bunch of reasons why they would keep him. So unfortunately for Fournette, I do think that the Buccaneers are going to move on and be in the market for a running back in some way, shape, or form.
Well, folks, let us know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section below. Do you think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will move on from Leonard Fournette based on some of the points that we gave here in this video? Or do you think that it would be more beneficial to them to hang on to Fournette for yet another year? Go check out Evan's work over at the Cannon Fire Podcast, BucsNation.com, as well as the Real to Real podcast, where I am a part of it as well. Evan, again, thank you so much for being on this video. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. And folks, thank you all so much for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed. And as always, folks, we'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.